Peace and blessings, everyone. You're now locked in with the baddest chaplain on the globe, Chris B. First and foremost, I want to thank you so much for subscribing to us on YouTube, BaddestChaplain.substack.com, Spotify, Apple, any and everywhere that you get podcasts. Our guest today is pastor of New Hope Fellowship and past president of Virginia Pharmacy Association, Dr. Leonard Edloe. Reverend Dr. Edloe is an educator. He has served on the clinical faculty of 4 colleges of pharmacy. He's been an executive in residence at Longwood University School of Business and Economics, an adjunct professor of Christian ethics at the John Leland Theological Center, and clinical professor of pharmacy at the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Pharmacy. He has served as vice chairman of the Board of Visitors of Howard University's College of Pharmacy and a member of the board of the Black History Museum and Cultural Center. He has also served as president of the American Pharmacists Association Foundation. He's received numerous community and pharmacy awards. He's also served on community health boards, many times in those endeavors being the first African American to serve as chairman or president of the organization. Reverend Dr. Edloe, it is an honor and a privilege. Thank you so much and welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
Yeah, just look, thankful for the opportunity to have a conversation. Always good to have a conversation.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So I want you to walk us through your journey, if you don't mind. Talk us through your journey and what inspired you to serve as both a minister and a pharmacist. Like I see this theme of serving the people in both spaces, but talk to us about how you got into both spaces and how you connected them in your vocation.
Yeah, well, the pharmacy part was very easy because, see, my father was a pharmacist.
Yeah.
And, you know, such a man. I mean, at 12 years old, his father died from the Spanish flu. And that's why I'm so big in the immunizations.
Right.
You know, and with no welfare, you know, Social Security, everything, he was able, during the Depression, finish pharmacy school. And so he just always had that kind spirit about him. I decided when I was in the 3rd grade, I was going to become a pharmacist.
No
he
kidding.
had a white coat for me, and I, you know, but early I couldn't be with him a lot because the pharmacy was open from 9:30 in the morning to 10 at night, and he did things opposite of everybody else. He got his business first, then he bought a home, and the last thing he got was a car. So, you know, when I got to the point where I could spend time with him over at the pharmacy, it just drew me in.
Yeah.
And now with the minister's part, it's 2 parts to that. The first part is, you know, everybody sees this big, healthy, robust man. As a child, I was this little thin weakling, and I caught double pneumonia.
Oh, no kidding.
Back then, you know, hospitalization wasn't the thing to do.
Right.
Pediatrician came to my house, and he told my mother, said, I've done everything I can for him.
Come on.
If you want this boy to live, pray. And so I'm going back and forth out of consciousness.
Yeah.
And I decided to make a deal with God that if you would heal me, I'm going to be a preacher. But the second part about that, my favorite uncle, and that was my mother's brother.
Yeah.
He was an AME pastor.
All right.
And so he built a lot of churches. He, you know, how in the cities, most of Black churches, they had bought a predominantly white church, and then the buildings were starting to run down. So he built new churches in Beckley, in Huntington, West Virginia.
Yeah.
In fact, Bethel, which is the oldest Black church west of the Alleghenies, when they had to rebuild, he built that. And he was at Brown's Chapel, and he got St. James, that new building. But anyway, when I was a little boy, when they were opening up Young's Chapel in Huntington, they had a church picnic. And we went out on they had it out in the middle of the river in Huntington. And so I got my plate, and all I had on it was potato salad and string beans.
Yeah.
All my family and people know me, call me brother. And he said, brother, where your fried chicken? I said, I don't like fried chicken. He said, how you going to be a preacher and not eat fried chicken? And so that was sort of, to me, the ordaining part of ministry when he put it on me, because even though I started preaching, I preached my first sermon when I finished my first year at Howard. I was 17 years old, but I sort of it was on the side, and people would do, say, well, you're ministering being a pharmacist. You don't have to be a pastor. But
right.
Finally, one day, I tell this story. I bought a house in Matthews to run away from people, and I ran in the guard. And my pastor in the Methodist church, he wouldn't put me in the ordination process, but I ran into Leontine Kelly, who was the first African American woman to be a bishop in the AME church. She was in Richmond recruiting pastors to come into the Methodist church.
Right.
And we sat down and had a conversation, and she said, Leonard Edloe, she said, if the bishop tells you to go to California, what you going to do with your pharmacist? And so that was our awakening moment. And fortunately, it was sort of strange. My wife never did join the Methodist church. She stayed in the Baptist church. And her pastor, Lance Watson, and I, we became like, so when I told him the story, he said, I'll license you, I'll ordain you, and, the rest is history.
Come on.
Yeah, right.
And thinking about what it means to have a space where they could honor your full vocation, because I sometimes wonder if people have sort of like a limited imagination about what God can do through a person, and people sort of see it as like, oh, like, you're a pharmacist, that's enough, or you're a minister, that's enough. But if God has called you to hold both of these fields and serve him in that way, people have to expand their belief in what's possible. You know what I mean?
And the thing is, they connect. So when I went to the University of Florida to get my doctorate, I had to do what they call a pharmaceutical care program project. And what I did, I looked at the health outcomes in the church that I served, which was Antioch down in Susan, and they weren't near any major medical center. And then Mango Hick Baptist Church in King William County was my second model. And, naturally that was close to the BCU Medical Center. And I looked at the difference in, not only the outcomes, but what patient education. And so health has been a real big part of my ministry. We've hosted countywide health fairs. And when I was chairman of the board of the Heart Association, the medical doctors, they are the presidents. And it was this guy, Larry Goldstein. He was head of neurology at Duke, but he was a Jew. And we got in the conversation, and like both of us agreed that Leviticus was a public health document.
Cool.
And so, I mean, when they talk about what you can eat, what you can come in contact with, and all of that, and I always say, the first two things in the Bible, when Genesis 1, it talks about what we should eat, and then in chapter 2, it tells Adam to manage the garden and work it and take care of it. And that's the same thing we tell a patient when they get sick, change your diet and exercise. And so the Bible and the Bible and medicine, it's right there together.
It was right there the whole time, right?
Yeah, but we don't see it. It's right there.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So talk to me a bit about what you would describe your ministry style as. Like thinking about, this. I'm imagining there's instances where, like, you're seeing a parishioner on Sunday. You might see him on Tuesday. As they come get their prescription. Like, talk to me about that ministry style.
Yeah, well, no, see, look, I don't know. My church is a long ways away.
Oh, got you.
When I had my own pharmacies, I did set up vaccination clinics at the church. Right. And so we would do vaccinations on the church. Yeah. And we still do high blood pressure checks at the church. But my ministry is different.
Got you.
I'm big on Christian education.
Yeah.
Because too much, I feel like we don't know what we believe and why we believe it.
Right.
And that's really in my book, I talk about this plantation theology that's still so much ingrained into how we do things.
Right.
So-called orthodoxy. But then I'm about empowering people, because when in my first church, it was only certain people could do certain things. And I'm still 13 years later, working on the DNA of some people, even though a lot of people have seen that they can be deacons, they can be trustees.
Right.
So it's all about empowerment, encouragement, opening up opportunities. But then, I believe in celebration. That when people hear me preach, they can't believe that it's the same person. In fact, when I was filling in for a guy in Richmond, and I filled this lady's prescription on Friday, and she came to the service, and I preached. And I said, "How you doing today?" And she looked at me. I said, "You don't realize who I am." And because I'm a whole lot. I'm 76 now, and I always say I'm not gonna preach as hard as I. So I start off real slow.
Yeah.
End up like C.A.W. Clark, that snowball that just keep on building.
Pacing yourself.
Yeah, because I believe in that celebration.
Of course.
We got to have that. I want you to know. I'll start off, and some people will say, that haven't heard me before. Well, I'm not going to even listen to that. But when I use logos, and they have this thing that Ralph West has about weaving the text and whatnot, and you have to go through. And I learned a whole lot about the text.
Yeah, of course.
And the thing is, I think people should know. We shouldn't just assume that they know a few verses, and context is so important. And so you throw all that in together, and you got me. My major downfall, I will delegate, but having run all, I had 4 pharmacies at one time, and if things have to be done, they got to be done, and I'm doing it. I'll give you the opportunity, but if you don't do it, I'm getting better. I've made my wife. She's not. She's ordained and licensed, and she did religious studies when she was at BCU. I'm still trying to get her to go to Union Presbyterian or Virginia Union, but I've sort of made her my executive minister, and that she's gonna get it done and make sure they get it.
Still giving that loving encouragement, like come through,
right. Yeah,
I hear that. So we're really excited about your new book, Restoring the Glory, Breathing New Life into the Rural Black Church. You recently did a webinar for Union Presbyterian Seminary's Leadership Institute, talking about your time in rural ministry and working with smaller congregations. Talk to us a bit about what inspired you to write this book and what your hope is for its impact.
Well, it was real strange. Like you said, I'm still an adjunct professor at Leland. And now we just call it Leland Seminary. They changed that in the last few months.
Oh, okay.
But they were talking about a merger with Baylor, and they got me to teach Christian ethics because I've written a lot of articles concerning ethical things, like pharmacists involved in lethal injection and all of that. And but when they said they were going to merge with Baylor, my doctorate is in pharmacy. All I had was a Master of Divinity, and I knew that wasn't going to cut it with Baylor. And unfortunately, when I went to Virginia Union, I didn't take Greek or Hebrew, so going into the PhD track right then and there wasn't an option. And then I learned that a THM would be considered a terminal degree. So I went with the intent purpose of studying the theology of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I used to listen to Martin Luther King Speaks every Sunday. I heard him when he came to Howard. In fact, once I went to the National Cathedral, it was a special thing for the retail merchants, and he preached his last sermon there. And I asked the lady, could I stand in the pulpit? And she says, why? I told her I was a pastor and a big fan of Martin Luther King. And she said, go on. She pulled the chain back. And it's a note in that pulpit. If you notice, people speak very slowly. It tells you specifically to speak very slowly because the space is so big.
Right. The echoes would just be bouncing off the walls.
And so that in turn, as I started taking the courses, and especially the courses Dr. Cannon was teaching.
Oh, yes.
Something started drawing me to my context. And then Dr. Cannon, I don't know whether you've seen her bibliographies.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, they just everywhere. And there was in this one bibliography, this book, Dark Glory by Harry Richardson. And I looked at that and I went over the library and got it. And I said, oh, I told Dr. Cannon, this is real interesting. She said, well, this was my professor.
Come
when
on.
I was in seminary, Johnson C. Smith at ITC. He found it at ITC. And then I found this book, These My Brethren. And then I realized Dr. Ellison had done a lot of work. And I got in touch with the archivist at Virginia Union, and I got his little pamphlet on the rural church in Virginia. And I just, how I want to say it, but after I read those two books, and there's another book, These My Brethren, and all those were written in the 30s, the 40s, and maybe the early 1950s.
Right.
I said, people need to know this history and then know where we can go, because to me, it's so much potential bound up in the rural church.
Mm-hmm.
The rural church has, been the source of membership for many of the urban churches. Many of the pastors, their original churches were rural churches. When you listen to some of them, they'll talk about, I was at this church. I mean, Rodney Wallace is at First African here in Richmond. Yeah. He was at Sharon Baptist Church in Weems. A. Lincoln James, 3 or 4 churches. It's just over and over again. And so I'm saying, I know the book is going to be touchy for some people. I'm getting a little far. But anyway, so I did that. That was the thesis. And then Dr. Cannon said, this would make a wonderful book. And so I said, okay, so 2 months after I graduated, she died. And I started working with Adam Bond, and he gave me some ideas of what to do. But it just always seems it was a setback. Right. But I was determined to honor her, that I was going to get this done and get it done right. It's not as long as some people might think, but it's not about length to me. It's about being meat.
That's right.
I've always been about the meat. In fact, Pastor Watson would always say, one thing about Dr. Edloe, he proves you don't have to be eternal to be divine.
Come on, right? So, beautifully said. Beautifully said.
So it's the same way with the book. And I think I've dealt with the history, the theology, and I close with Martin Luther King. Where do we go from here?
Oh, come on.
That's the last chapter, because so much that we have to do. And getting back to what I said, I hope some people see themselves, and even though it's troubling, they will change. But most especially, I want this for young seminarians who the first option they're going to have is either, an associate at a local church, or if they really want to fully do their ministerial gifts, to go into a rural church and serve there. Yeah.
No doubt.
Because I had no idea what I was going to. The thing that saved me was my wife. My wife grew up in the rural church. And sometimes, Lord always speaks to you when you're doing a sermon. And I have something in there. And the Lord said, well, should I say that? And I go to her and I said, can I say this? She said, no, you cannot say that. They'll ring you out. And so just some help for that. And even for the rural church, when I was at Virginia Union, Dr. Cannon told me to include it. I did a thing on the church as an impediment or, incentive to Black entrepreneurship. And so I really feel the church has a role in so many things, because it's the only institution really in many rural areas that Black people control and can address the needs. Will address the needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thinking about that with regards to your work in the community, you being a community leader so extensively, what advice would you share with someone who is listening to this, watching this, and wants to lead in their community, but's not really sure where or how to start? Like, what advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing I say is learn how to serve. That's the first thing you got to do.
There it is.
Because you can't lead anybody if you don't know how to serve.
Right.
I went to Armstrong, even though I lived a few blocks from Maggie Walker. And so even though I wanted to be a leader, I knew that was not the context to be a leader in.
Right.
And so I was a campaign manager, and I learned how to serve,
there it is.
Campaigns. In fact, I did so well with my first person that when the elections came up, they would say, get him to be a campaign manager.
You became the kingmaker.
and that's a lot of work. That's a lot of
a whole lot of work, yeah.
And it was when I went to school, everybody wanted to be head of student government, and I just decided I'd do this American Pharmacist Association thing. And that just went off the chain,
Yeah.
But, be willing to serve and then learn all you can. Now, a lot of things I had to learn on the fly because remember I talk about serving first?
Right.
We had this project in Richmond called Model Cities. And this was in 1970. The city was getting $3 million a year to work on Church Hill.
Okay.
And I went over just to do a talk one evening on sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, I'm serving on the board. And then the federal government says, if y'all don't get this thing right, we're going to shut the program down. Right. They made me chairman of the board.
Come on.
And we worked it out and saved the program. And some of the things you see right now in Richmond are because of that.
Yeah.
But if you can, always try to get on a board where you can learn. And I was on the board of the Richmond Memorial Health Foundation.
Yeah.
And they taught me about governance, finance, all the things necessary to run a board. And that's why, I've been called to do so many things.
Sure.
Because most people, governance is a hard thing.
No doubt about
it. But people don't want to take the time to study. They'll get you in trouble. In fact, I think that's one reason why after serving longer than anybody 100 years at church, because I just, said, well, this is not right.
Yeah.
People didn't like that because they always want to do things their way.
Of course.
That's why I was able to be president of the American Pharmacist Association Foundation. And even at, the Black History Museum, after I stayed there a little while and when things got real crazy with the finances, they made me treasurer. And And glad to say, we got everything straight. The city gave us some money. They don't have any debt in there. And so it's one to be able to serve and learning how to serve. And then when you get in a position, just take all of that knowledge over the years. Another thing was the American Heart Association, because, I was chair for that for Maryland, D.C., Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And so
whoa. Yeah.
I was in Dallas regularly, even though I just went to the airport. We would meet in the Admirals Club. But when you're around people like that, and serving on these boards with these senior vice presidents, it's the governance saved me because I really didn't get myself in trouble. I knew when to say I need to recluse myself, and not do things in proper procedure and whatnot.
Yes,
it's just like I said, serve, be willing to serve, and then when the opportunity, prepare yourself. I mean, it takes a lot of reading, and just like you're doing a podcast, there's a lot of leadership podcasts.
A ton.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's real easy just listening to what some of these great people were saying. I was listening to Craig Rochelle yesterday morning before I did my colonoscopy because I knew I wasn't going to get enough steps in, and I tried to keep my record move going. And the people who was bringing in, like the sister who was the general manager of the Mavericks and whatnot, and talking about, the transparency, and honesty and whatnot with people. All of that plays in the leadership,
No doubt about it.
And when we really need it. In the Black community, we really need it because guy came to do revival one time, and he was preaching it. He's talking about how we got people serving in the church. They're not qualified to do the things.
Yeah, yeah.
And we got boards and commissions people serve on, and their names are just on the letterhead.
Right.
And, that's one thing I'm real proud of. When I've asked people for recommendations for awards and stuff, they said, Leonard Edloe, he is more than a name on the letterhead.
That's it.
He can get the job done.
Right, right. You're not just there as a figurehead, but actually like functioning. Yeah,
I'm on the board.
That's it. For sure. So I want you to tell us about like, outside of your work, how do you find yourself spending your time? Like, listening to the podcast, listening to or consuming information about leadership. But how else do you find yourself like spending your time?
Well, I love reading, and I will read the side of the cereal box.
I hear that.
And then I love working out. I love working out, and I love spending time in Matthews because got a cottage on the side of the creek.
Yeah.
Just watching nature, and I. Here lately, I haven't been able to do as much of that as I want to.
Sure.
Because, I'm still working as a pharmacist, and one of the pharmacists left, but they hired a new pharmacist. So I'm back to 1 day a week. So I'll really be able to get to do what I want to do.
Right.
I love traveling, even though I had to stop flying, but there's still a lot of things that my wife and I can do driving. And I do the groceries.
I hear you.
My wife, I never forget, I told her I'd go do it after I sold the pharmacy. She said, I know you do this. I had you doing it all along, but it's stuff like that. And then, taking time with people. I got a real nice text yesterday from this guy. Actually, it was a voicemail talking about how much he appreciated how I developed his leadership.
Yeah.
Opened the door. And when he heard me speak, but we didn't talk, but he just sent me an email and we connected. And that same thing from a young man that's at Morehouse. And we were doing something with the Well Project at VCU, and I just sat down at the table and he was there. And we just started talking, and he's ended up filming me. And
come on.
Yeah, he's doing film stuff down at Morehouse.
Yeah.
It's just I love empowering people and seeing a change in people. So even though I'm really an introvert, but I would love. I always take time to talk to people. I had a young lady. She's in college now in North Carolina, but she never said anything much in church, and she came up the other day and she wanted to buy my book. And so naturally, I sold it to her. I told everybody at church, I said, I would love to give everybody a book, but I had to self-publish this thing. So
come on, I need some of these things, right?
But it was just something having the conversation, and she was talking about the courses she was taking, and it just made me feel good that here's somebody I nurtured over all those years, and now she's in college, and it's blooming because she's out of the shadow of her brother, who was an engineer.
Right.
And that makes me feel real good, coming out of rural church. I got one lady, she's director now of music at Hopewell High School.
Oh, okay.
First one in her family to finish college.
Right.
That's why, I say I'm big on education.
Of course. It's foundational.
Yeah.
Very much so. I wanted to ask you about a moment, and perhaps in this season or just in life, that really sticks out to you, where you really felt a deep sense of gratitude or awe.
Well, there's so many. The voicemail yesterday, that just did something for me.
That's awesome.
I mean, here's a guy, he wasn't even, he's a pharmacist. He wasn't even an officer in his local association. And he went on to become president of the Washington, D.C. Pharmaceutical Association. He ended up heading the Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion.
Yeah.
And then, he took my seat I had in the 1980s. They elected him to the board of trustees of the American Pharmacists Association.
Yeah.
And he was sent it yesterday because he asked me to write a letter so he would become a fellow. And so yesterday he found out he was a fellow. And so he just went through all of that and, how I carried him through this. And like I always say, it's always about building things for the generation that comes behind.
No doubt about it.
It bothers me when people are threatened by younger people.
Right.
And, I experienced that when I first came back to Richmond.
Oh, yeah.
When I ran for office, somebody said, who told him to run?
Like he jumped the line in their opinion.
Yeah. And I did. It's real funny, it was an election for Richmond and Henrico.
Yeah.
And I ran against this guy, Gerald Belials, and I lost to him by 3,000 votes.
Mm-hmm.
He went on to become Attorney General and then governor.
Oh.
But we became friends.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you go to the Richmond Forum, both of us would be there. And he'd see me, and he'd stop talking or get up from the table and come over and say,
hey,
it's so good seeing you. And I always tell him, he became all those governor and whatnot. I'm still filling prescriptions. But we've got, and see, he wasn't one of us that asked that question.
Yeah.
We told him to run. We've got to encourage people, and that's what I do all the time. I'm always encouraging young pharmacists, young preachers. And it's sort of funny. I never will forget when I became pastor, some of my friends didn't have, they weren't pastors yet. I bring them to the church and have them to preach. And next thing they say, I got a church. I got a church. So that's and I was much older than all of them because I went to seminary. I was in my 50s.
Right.
And these guys in their 20s. So it's just good. And another young man, he was under a lot of pressure.
Sure.
And he wanted to drop out of seminary. And I told him, I said, look, man, look at what I do. Mm-hmm. I don't come on Friday and Saturday night. I come on Friday. And when I finish doing Friday, I'm going to come on Saturday. You're 24 years old. You got plenty of time. He took my advice. Now he's got a D-min, and he's a pastor with his father. So
beautiful.
We just got to do that. And when I see that, it just, I got a question in the Bible study I'm doing tonight. And how is God using you?
Yeah.
That's so important. Not what other people are doing for us, but how is God using us to make things
right.
Better?
I want you to imagine that you're hosting a dinner. This is a question, as you know, I ask all of the guests. You can invite 4 people. It can be dead or living, fictional or real people. Dr. Edloe, who are you bringing to this dinner?
Well, I'm not bringing them, but I would, like to talk to my grandfather who died when my father was 12, and my other grandfather who I saw, but because he had a stroke, he could never talk, so I never had a conversation.
Yeah.
But I would want to be there. I want a conversation with Frederick Douglass.
Oh, yeah.
Because Frederick Douglass could say things in 1850 that many people can't get away with saying today.
No.
Fact, I was called out as president of the Richmond Urban League for using his July 4th speech as part of my starting the meeting.
That was a problem?
Yeah, well, when you start talking about bombast and whatnot, because the Urban League is conservative.
Sure.
In fact, I got, I had Bill Clay to come and speak for me. And I got a letter from somebody complaining, and I graciously replied to the letter. And then next thing I know, I was sitting in the office of the president of the Federal Reserve Bank, who was head of the United Way. And I think he learned a lesson. Be careful what you ask for.
Come on.
He said, the next time, just have an athlete come. And so you know who I invited to come.
Oh, let's go.
I invited Arthur Ashe.
Yes. I'm here for it. It's like I'm doing what I was told. Told to bring an athlete.
We're not gonna say anything to that man again.
Ever again.
Yeah, and then the second person, in that same time frame.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a whole lot more to this woman.
Yes.
Than we get to see Harriet Tubman.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I think she played a much bigger role. The Underground Railroad was one thing, but I think she was an operative for the United States Army also.
Yeah, you're right.
We don't hear about that.
No.
I think that needs to be talked about. And then, see, that's three. I had a toss-up between Mordecai Johnson and Howard Thurman.
Ooh, heavy hitters.
And because my father made Mordecai a living icon.
Okay.
And I've heard Mordecai, he spoke at Howard.
Yeah.
And it's between him and Howard Thurman.
Yeah.
And I'm picking Howard Thurman.
Right.
Because just, Jesus and the Disinherited.
Come on, right.
But also I found out that whenever Vernon Jordan, who I knew,
yeah,
and in fact, Vernon and I had a run-in one time in Atlanta, and somebody said, "Do you realize that's Vernon Jordan?" And I said, he put on his pants the same way I did. Whenever Vernon needed somebody to talk to, Vernon would go and talk to Howard Thurman.
Yeah, sure.
And so I said, if that's the case, I'm going to pick him.
Right.
And then the last person, W.E.B. Du Bois.
Ooh.
And, I mean, when I was doing one of the seminars we have to do, and with Christine and who's the lady in Christian education at Union Presbyterian?
Oh, Becky Davis, thinking?
No, it's another lady. So Becky's at Charlotte.
Oh, Cindy Kisolito.
Well, the lady that she must not be there now.
Okay.
But anyway, I had to read a lot of Du Bois.
Okay.
And I admit I hadn't read enough of him.
Sure.
When he talks about this duality and inside or outside and all of that. And I really, you heard people bash the talented Tim.
Right.
When I got to read that, another very short book, when I got to read it, it wasn't anything wrong with the book. It was the implementation by people.
Yeah.
And so just, that type of mind, that type of intellect.
Yeah.
Just to draw stuff out of me.
Sure.
And see, that was the thing when I go back, when I think about Katie Cannon, when I got there, she said, Reverend Dr. Leonard, she said, you got too much going on in your mind. We got to crystallize and bring stuff out. And talking to an intellect like that, I think it would just, it would be stuff buried in me.
Oh, yeah.
That I didn't know that he would bring out, and that he would just, shine more light on. And that's
for sure.
That's why I'm so big on education, and it's
critical.
It's just important, and
yes.
To know this, and I just encourage it over and over again, because I had a guy told me he used to be Grand Master of the Masons in Virginia. He said, if you want to hide things from Black people, write it down.
Yeah.
And we've just got to be willing to pick up those books and read them. Every month, I have a book of the month.
As you should.
Since my book came out in November, you know what the book of the month is, December.
Without question, right.
But I do a wide range of things, because I just feel like we need to know these things.
No doubt about it.
When we were talking the other night about the Christian nationalism, I don't think enough of everyday Black Christians even realize what they're up against.
Come on.
We've got to talk about it, and and that's why I push, people on Jamar Tisby, with the color of compromise and stuff like that, because we've got to acknowledge what religion, the role that has played, and
no doubt,
we've got to understand history to know what's going on in Gaza right now.
Come on.
Even when I talk about chosen, chosen means being in relationship with God. And so if we're in relationship with God, we're chosen also. But you got to read to be able to understand it. And then you got to read, you got to get that wide breadth of stuff.
That's it.
Yeah. So I just, so much, but I love doing what I'm doing. I just, I just, I'm glad they're telling me now I don't have to work as much. They're hiring a pharmacist, so
that's it.
But it seems, go ahead.
It's Dr. Edloe. It seems like you just have so much joy, the work that you do. It makes me think of that. What was it, Mark Twain quote? If you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. Like it seems like as hard as you've worked, you've also never worked a day in your life because you're just doing things you enjoy. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll tell anybody when I came to Richmond.
Yeah,
I had offers to make $25,000 a year. It's 1970, $15,000 a year. And I came to my daddy and I worked for $6,900 a year.
Come on.
I worked a long time for $11,000 a year. It was only, as I got into opening up to all the pharmacists that I pay myself what I should have, but I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah.
And it's been the same thing with being a pastor. I mean, I've been the nice guy. They came up with a package for me. I didn't ask to negotiate, didn't sign a contract.
Right.
And then one evening, we were having church meeting. I don't know why the guy thought it was cute or something. He said, you've done us a favor. You the cheapest pastor we ever had.
Oh, Lord.
So, it was a little offensive then.
Of course, right. Cheap.
And then when, you plan a church, you got things you got to do. And so when you can't get paid a lot then, but, because I realized they removed 4 of the deacons in order to remove me. And when those deacons say, Pastor, will you come and preach? And I was joking. I said, we're going to have service on the parking lot. And they had rented the conference room in the little hotel over there in Gloucester.
Wow.
How could I turn them down?
Right.
How could I say to them, well, this $100 a Sunday, not cutting it.
Ain't cutting it, right.
But, it's like I told people Sunday, I don't do things for people.
Right.
I do it for God.
That's it.
I do it for God.
That's it.
I serve God. So
no doubt about it.
And since, like I always say, if you love God, you should love your neighbor.
Come on.
Your neighbor is made in the image of God.
That's right.
And then you should love yourself. In fact, that's my first sermon. And when I used to talk radio show every week after I closed the pharmacy. And whenever I close up, we call it What's Going On. So I have Marvin Gaye playing that.
Yeah.
But when I would quote, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, body, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
Since to a Black audience, I say, that's what we have to do. We have to love ourselves. And that's why I preached that first sermon, because growing up in Richmond, as a Black person, it was real hard to like yourself. It was real hard. But to go to Howard and see Frederick Douglass Hall.
Come on.
To live in Charles Drew Hall.
Come on.
And be in class with his son.
Whoa.
And then to have a dean who was the first African American to be a dean of a college of pharmacy in the United States. I mean, it had me seeing myself in a different way.
Exactly.
And I want everybody to see that, that we are just as good, even though my daddy always told me, you got to do better.
Yeah.
You got to do better or people won't expect. And I didn't realize how much that was until I sold my pharmacies and then went for a month to be a consultant and saw what people accepted.
Right.
And how much less they were accepting that from what I was providing.
Come on. That is really it. No, it just sounds like that whole sense of, people sometimes will say you can't be what you can't see, but there's something about the encouragement and the extra lift you get of being around these models of excellence, in the sense of, it just expands the possibility of what you can be in the world. It sounds like, you were really blessed to have, that foundation of a family that like encouraged you to be your best self, but then really it sounds like going to Howard just like, catalyzed you, almost like you took off like a rocket.
Yeah, and like I said, I knew a lot about Mordecai because of my father.
Yeah.
But I still feel like right now they don't teach the students at Howard enough about Mordecai Johnson. I don't think Virginia Union they teach the students about Marcus Ellison and what he went through. We've got to, it's hard to have a building named after you, and both of them have names built after you. You don't know the story.
Right, it's just a building. It's just exactly. It's just where I have class on my dorm is.
Yeah, and the fact that both of those men, they the first two black presidents of those institutions.
Right.
And I really learned about Mordecai reading a book on the theology of Martin Luther King when they talked about all his influences and how Mordecai. And I forgot to tell you, Mordecai ended into the conversation because he was a pastor,
right?
And James Cheek was a pastor, I think, also. And to me, they were the two best presidents of Howard.
Come on.
I'm not pushing Dr. Franklin to the side, the guy that just stepped there because he was real good. And he got, we building our new pharmacy building that he promised. I told him I stay on the board of business until I got that promise.
That's right.
We got that in the new nursing school. But those two, preachers, pastors,
Right. That's the foundation. And I mean, what you're speaking about is, it sometimes feels like Halcyon days or something that's of the past, but there was a sense of, pastors and religious leaders being able to demonstrate that leadership in the public square. And that's something that is too often missing now, or it happens in a very controversial sense of it. But I think we need to have, especially for the Black community, we've always had this understanding of all the different leaders being able to help share the load, Yeah, for sure. So tell me, before you go, what would you say is your hope for the world in this moment?
I would just, and I'm not talking about, just love, but if we could get rid of the negation of people, to me, that's just, when I see people being looked down upon, when, I hear this talk about polluting the blood. And,
oh, gosh, yes.
All of those things. I mean, why can't there's enough?
Come on.
Everybody in
Come
this
on.
world.
Yes.
And so, we got to work on both sides, though, because we got people who are willing to accept, that's why I had that problem with that theology of, suffer and endure and we'll have everything in the by and by.
Right.
God, Jesus wants us to have an abundant life right now.
Right now, yeah.
But this thing that you have to negate others to have what you want to have.
Yeah.
When, in essence, when you negate others, you're still in the same place.
Come on.
Nothing has changed.
Nothing changes, yeah.
And so if we could just get everybody to see themselves like science and the Bible say everybody came from that same woman.
Come on.
Eve. It's that same woman. If we could all get to see that, and sure, there's going to be conflict. Because of the personalities and because none of us are perfect. But this thing about negating a whole race of people, or in the case of negating religion.
Yeah.
And then helping religions to get certain things.
Talk about that.
That have been negated. It's just, that hurts me so. I just, I get back to Howard Thurman. I wish we would see more of the religion of Jesus than the religion of Jesus.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Edloe, it is always an honor and a joy to get a chance to speak with you. For those of you who are watching or listening, be sure to pick up Restoring the Glory, Breathing New Life into the Rural Black Church. It's available on Barnes & Noble, on Amazon, and wherever you get books. I'll share a link to bookshop.org where you'll be able to purchase a copy of Dr. Edloe's new book. But once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching and for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to us on Substack, on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and everywhere where you listen to podcasts. Until next time, be blessed, be safe, and know that you're loved. All right. So live in that way. Live lovingly. All right. Until next time, peace.